All right. Thank you for joining us for the coordinator town hall today. We're going to keep this one light and fluffy and fun. We do have some fun, interesting information to share with you. Namely, we've been getting a lot of questions, and it's time of the year that's very normal. And questions that we're seeing a lot of, we just wanted to make sure that we're sharing information on that, and then also opening the floor to allow you to ask any questions that you may have of us as we are going through this tuition benefit process for spring 2023. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and kind of jump right in. Just as a note, Matthew is here with me as well. So if you have any questions, you can either drop them in the chat or we'll wait until the Q&A section where everyone can kind of go over them, whatever you feel most comfortable with, of course. Jumping in first, we're going to just go over what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about important upcoming dates, because obviously we have a few of those coming up. Sorry for this blindingly white screen. A few quick reminders of the regular questions we've been getting a lot of, and then we'll open it up to the general Q&A. So first things first, just some important dates that are coming up in, unfortunately, no particular order, but mostly just by semester. For fall, the last most important date that we have coming up is January 23rd. That's when any overrides or corrections are due to us by 5 p.m. We have run final calculations for the fall semester, so your actual use in your reports should be as accurate as humanly possible at this time. Obviously, there's some weirdness when it comes to the estimated section, and some of you may still be encountering some allocation issues. Anything that we can help with, definitely let us know. But if there's some movement that needs to happen with your allocations, you might need to also involve the deans of your departments as well. Now, coming into the spring, we've already hit a few of those deadlines, and I've removed those as we've passed them. But just as a reminder, tuition is due on January 20th. This is also the add drop deadline. Those are the same day. So if you have students who are looking to make weird adjustments to their schedule, you want to let them know what we're looking at as far as the deadline and when they need to have their tuition paid for whatever portion they owe of that. Additional reminder, the campus census is on January 30th. That is also when the portal will close for any entry for spring 2023. So if you have anyone that you still need to enter or make adjustments for, it needs to be by that day. After that point, you'll need to be reaching out to us for any assistance. We're generally not a fan of retroactive entry, so let's avoid that if we can. But if there's any sort of adjustment that needs to be made, my student was an RA and suddenly that funding fell out and they need to be a GR instead or whatever it may be, you can definitely reach out to us and we'll help with whatever we can in those regards. Your signed signature pages are due to us by February 6th. I've already gotten a bunch of those and I'm keeping those in a file. So thank you very much for sending those. Make sure you get those to me as soon as you can if you haven't. And then moving on beyond that, we have student insurance payments are generally due by the 13th and such, but that's moving further and further into this semester. I kind of want to just focus on the January and early February dates for now. So I'm not going to go over every single one of these. As a reminder, this is available on our website if you ever want to review this. This is not something we keep a secret, so you can go into our website to the important dates section, and this is all posted there for each semester, including summer, which of course is upcoming. We don't have anything big happening for summer for a little while, though, so I didn't include it here. Now, we're going to talk about the first thing. I've been getting a lot of questions recently about what exactly tuition benefit does and does not cover. And namely, a lot of those questions are coming in the form of a student will send a bill to a coordinator, and then the coordinator will be like, why was this X fee not covered or this Y thing not covered? And so I'm just wanting to give a quick reminder on like what it is that tuition benefit actually does cover and what it does not. So it does cover resident tuition up to 12 graduate credits, up to 6 credits for summer, but we're not too worried about that for spring right now. It does conclude mandatory fees and, of course, the non-resident waiver where applicable and eligible. It does not cover differential tuition. I've been getting a lot of questions about differential tuition lately. I've been getting a lot of situations where it's not very clearly labeled, perhaps, on the bill, and so there's some confusion on what's landing where. Just as a reminder, if you can find that differential tuition and note that for students, they are responsible for that. We do not pay that here. Additionally, any fees outside of mandatory fees, that includes, late fees or certain fees that are going to fall out of material fees and such things. Undergraduate courses are not covered. We're not going to be covering those. Repeated courses outside of the typical curriculum, we're totally fine with things like thesis. We totally understand people are going to take like 10 thesis courses during their time here, but we are not going to cover the ones that are there just retaking to improve a grade, for example, if they didn't do so well their first time. Additionally, if they're in graduate courses above 12, we are not going to be covering anything above that 12 limit. That is the responsibility of the student. We don't do non-credit courses nor continuing education courses. Those contract ones could be a little tricky, so just make sure we're watching where they're getting enrolled. Withdrawn courses are a very weird sticking point. We get a lot of that later in the semester where students will withdraw from a course and then all of the sudden, they aren't aware of how that's going to affect them. Oh, I have to pay for that. Oh, that's brought me below my 9 credit requirement. And suddenly I need to pay for that tuition and all of my tuition in some cases. So if you ever have a student come to you going, I might drop a class and it's like 4 weeks in the semester, be like, hey fam, is that a withdraw? That might be a problem. Just so you're aware and they're aware and everyone's on the same page. Audited courses, I appreciate the gusto of students who want to take audited courses and refresh themselves or just go learn something interesting and new, kind of like those non-credit ones. But we are not going to cover that in those cases. International student fees, that surcharge is generally what it will show as, and we get a lot of questions about that because people feel it falls under mandatory fees, but it is not. I'm sure all of you have had the student who's come to you, not just for that fee, but for others and said, well, I have to pay this, so it's a mandatory fee. And that's not the case. It is a mandatory fee as defined by the university. And then finally, non-resident waiver for RAs after reaching those cumulative graduate credits of 84 or more. That's a very rare scenario, but it does happen for certain students. So those are kind of our separation. Obviously, I know that you guys can only see so much as far as their bill is concerned, and you have to go a lot off of like what the student is providing you. So if you ever need help in some of these regards, we're still happy to help with that, but I've just been getting a lot of questions about it. So I wanted to kind of refresh that real quick. Speaking of common questions, another one I'm getting that's kind of related to that. Tuition benefit covers graduate courses. Does that include courses outside of their program of study? Yes, as long as it's a graduate course, that's fine. We will cover all of that. This includes courses outside of their career of study, so long as they're not the continuing education contract courses we were talking about earlier. Those are kind of our weird problem child courses. Common question, dose. A student's tuition benefit is showing us multiple line items in their bill. Do I need to be concerned? Only if it seems like there's something missing. If there's some portion is missing, but if you can see in those multiple line items, it seems to be covering everything, that's okay. But if you're like, okay, I have like 3 line items, but it's not covering all of it. Like there's definitely this huge gap in their tuition. Yeah, okay, that should be a little more concerning. Let's take a look at that for sure. This is especially true for our non-resident waiver students. It is very common that will show as separate line items because the non-resident waiver will likely go through before the rest of the items, which is, we have another question about that a little later, so I'll touch a bit more on that in a moment. Common question 3, we are looking to support a student on extended tuition benefit. How much should we expect to pay? That is a great question. It is a weird one to answer as well. Since we don't necessarily assess tuition in our office, I cannot really guarantee certain costs. I can't say, oh, it's going to be exactly this amount, because unfortunately, I just don't have a direct hand in that part of the process. However, there's various resources available at your disposal to kind of find a real good estimation of this. Income Accounting posts their tuition schedules online via their website, which you can use as a reference at any time. They do have some tuition calculators as well, but that includes a lot of extra information that may not be as helpful for you as well. As a reminder, when we're doing XTPP, all we are charging are the residency tuition and the mandatory fees as normal. So that's really all you need to account for in that regard. Generally speaking as well, we're going to use the total that we use for each semester, and for fall and for spring, we're looking at about 5,170 for full-time enrollment when we do our general estimations for 100% benefit. That's where you actually see that estimated use is coming from in your allocations as well. So you could do and anticipate similar. You could use similar numbers. There are some other resources we might be able to point you to as well if none of these things are really panning out in the way you were hoping to. Let us know if we can help, but we, again, don't have a direct hand in that. So I can only help in so many regards. Question 4, my student's tuition benefit posted today, but it looks incomplete or some amount is missing. What's going on? Kind of as we mentioned in section 2, the non-resident waiver is usually the biggest reason we're seeing that. And that's because it shows up as that separate line item. And generally it will go through first. And it's usually a much larger number. So you'll see that large number go first, and we're just waiting for a smaller amount to happen next. And so that will show up on the next portion of that. Generally, we would suggest about 2 full business days from the time you see the start going through to let that happen, because it does take those 2 full business days in most cases. Again, non-resident waiver will go through first, followed by the rest of the fees and tuition. Now, common question 5, and this is kind of my last common question before we open it up to Q&A stuff. My students' benefits disappeared for no reason. What's going on? Always a panicking moment when you look at your report and it's like, what happened? What's going on with you? There's usually a reason. It may not be immediately apparent, however. The report will tell you as much as it possibly can, but if it's not showing there, something else may be going on. As always, we would always first suggest reviewing your report, especially if the student just comes to you and is like, my TV's gone. It's like, well, let's look at your report and see what's going on. And see if there's any error messages that apply to that student to ensure no outliers or other weirdness is going on. Common errors that we see a lot of: FTE overages or issues and invalid job record issues. Those are probably the most common ones that we are interacting with, at least throughout the whole semester. Earlier in the semester, we also do see a lot of, especially prior to the tuition deadline, coordinators have adjusted the tuition benefit record for some reason, and the student hasn't done their new signature. We see that a lot, and you just got to remind your students they need to do that signature portion every time an adjustment goes through. And then additionally, we also see students who are adding and dropping and changing classes, and maybe they've dropped a course, but they haven't added a new one, like they haven't brought themselves back up to the minimum requirement. So that is an everyday thing. That cycle is constantly checking. So if they ever drop below and don't fix it as soon as possible, they may see their tuition benefit affected during the time that they haven't made that fix yet. We're in a weird portion of time when it comes to the registrar's office, since my previous experience has some knowledge here. First week is not too bad, but next week we're going to be moving into things like permission codes, and then the week after that, late forms. So dropping and adding classes is going to be more difficult for students in the very near future. So again, if you have students coming to you going like, I'm gonna drop a class, you're like, what's your plan? Like, are you gonna still be above 9? How's this gonna affect your graduation? All that jazz. Those are all very valid and important things to be asking these students. Now, those are just a lot of common questions I've been getting a lot of recently, and I just kind of wanted to do a brief overview to check that, just so that if you're running into any issues that are similar, you feel comfortable and covered. But of course, I want to open up for general Q&A as well. Again, Matthew of Infinite Knowledge is here, so for some reason I am not sure of something, he will fix and correct it very quickly. So please feel free to ask whatever you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable asking something in the general group, you can either send it as a chat, either to me specifically or Matthew specifically, and we'll answer it as soon as we can, or just in general terms. Or you can wait until a bit later and when other people have signed off, whichever you prefer. But I will stay available and do Q&A times for as long as humanly possible. So if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in that chat.
Heather, you're on the air.
Hello. So I'm wondering if there is a good, reliable way of estimating how much tuition benefit you're going to use in a semester. I've tried different methods and I've failed to get a reliable estimate for myself. And then the thing I noticed when looking at the tuition benefit report throughout the semester is that, like, at the top, and since it was fall semester, that information at the top was only for fall semester, it would say that my actual used was like 303,000. But then, like, as I scrolled to the bottom of the tuition benefit report and looked at the totals, I couldn't find that figure anywhere. So I can't figure out like what figure I use to know how much to estimate or to figure out how much I'm using each semester.
That is a very good question. Of course, like, as we mentioned before, there are some of those things that you can default to as far as like the 5170 and such, but that is only super helpful when you're doing, like, you anticipate a lot of 12 credit usage, or you can use that to kind of like do some math to go down to, well, what would 9 credits maybe look like at that 75% value? And a lot of it
Mhm.
will also depend on what your students like enrollment is going to look like. How many students do you anticipate? Because the more students that you enter, that adds up very quickly, of
Mhm.
course. And so keeping spreadsheets and things like that. I've seen departments do a lot of different tactics with this. I recently saw a department that actually will manually do a spreadsheet of like, these are the students that they're entering. These are how many credits that we've spoken with them and anticipate they're going to use. And so doing that math, this is what we expect. And then they work from that value. Of course, with your estimated use, just as a reminder, that's always going to shoot the moon, mostly because when you're putting students into the portal, there's no current proration for 50 or 75% for the estimated use.
Mhm.
That is a dream, that is a goal,
Mhm.
that is something we would think of fondly in the future. But unfortunately, we don't have any hard data or dates for that adjustment yet. So for now, anything you put in for estimated or like you put in the portal, the estimated is always going to go for that full 5170. And so that estimated use is definitely going to look a little weird as you're moving through semesters.
Okay.
Matthew,
So,
anything you might add on that?
Nope, you explained that quite well.
Okay, go
okay.
ahead, Heather. You had a follow up.
Oh, I was just wondering, why, if my actual usage is 303,000, um, why is that not the total anywhere in the report? Does that make sense? So like when I ran the report in November,
Mhm.
up in the top right-hand corner, it said actual usage, like 303 some thousand.
Sure.
But then like I scroll to the bottom of the report and I look at all the totals of everything that has paid out, and there's not a 303,000 there anywhere. So I can't make sense of how the figures are, you
Sure,
know what I
sure.
mean?
Just out of curiosity, are you looking at this when you're looking at the students? Are you looking like at their tuition totals that show in that section below?
I've looked, I just scanned the bottom of the entire report. Well,
No,
above the
that's perfectly
RAs.
fine. I just wanted to make sure where you were looking for that
Yeah,
data.
I didn't
Because
find 303 in any of the totals at the bottom.
no worries, I totally understand. Interesting fun fact about the
Mhm.
report. So the information that shows in your allocation, that is just what's coming in and out of the allocation, but the tuition totals that show in the student lines, that will
Mhm.
actually include things that may not be coming out of the allocation, such as the non-resident waiver.
Right.
This
Okay.
section it shows there actually just says that says total tuition. That means total
Sure.
tuition that will be covered by the TB process, and then
Okay.
what the actual reduction is. And that's why you see some differences in that when it's like,
Okay.
oh, if I add all these up, that's way more than what's in my allocation. Correct, because what that is doing is like, oh, hey, the non-resident waiver should also affect them. So that's how
Yeah.
much is going to be reduced for them as well. We saw
Okay.
some interesting things with that recently. So it's a fun fact I learned recently too.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
well,
right.
we
So
are
I'll,
working on some enhancements to the report that are in progress, but we're not quite to implementation yet. That will put a little bit more information with each student.
sure.
So disaggregating the what tuition benefit covers resident tuition mandatory fees from the non-resident waiver for better calculation.
Okay. But for the time being, then I should just use the 5,170 just to make sure that I'm not gonna overspend. You know what I mean? That I'm gonna promise it to students and then not have it. Okay. All
Absolutely.
That's
right.
a good way. And then that changes a little bit each semester, of course. So if you ever want to
Mhm.
reach out for us for updates, we can let you know what the new values are.
Sure.
We try to
Okay.
keep this as public information as possible so there's no surprises. But if you're ever having
Mhm.
difficulties, let me know. I'm happy to get you that
Sure.
info.
Okay. But the 5,170 is probably 100% for 12 credits, right? I'm assuming.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is going to be
Okay.
the good number for spring.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Not a problem. I hope that was helpful. Whitney, I see you have a question, and then I will jump to your information, Nola, next.
So on my TBP report, since entering all my students, my estimated remaining was 5170.37 or something like that. I'm looking at my TBP report now, and it says my estimated remaining is 2,465.15. And I'm wondering why that number has changed, because now I need to add one more student to my TBP report, and I don't have enough remaining funds, but I'm wondering why that number reduced.
Sure. So my biggest question would be, when did you check it previously? Like, when was it that you were seeing the previous numbers?
Yesterday.
yesterday. We did do
Mhm.
final calculations yesterday, so your actual use may have adjusted yesterday
Oh,
for what
okay.
your student usage was. So that's probably the most likely factor as to what's
Okay.
adjusted your estimated as well.
Okay, so I should just request more money, I guess, from Cynthia to get, okay,
Yeah, and we can help in adjusting that allocation once Cynthia knows where we want to move that to and from. But
Okay.
we'll need that for sure.
okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Not a problem. It looks like we had a question about how to confirming how the entry of GRs will work. Much of that process is the same as far as the portal is concerned. You would go into the portal, and while entering the students, you would just select the GR selection and enter it either as 100% or whatever percentage of GR plus the other options. If there's any specifics about that process that we can help with, or if we'd like to go over that in a tutorial, like I can sit down with that person, I'm happy to. Just reach out to me and I can totally go over that with you for more specifics if that didn't answer the question as we were looking for it. Heather, it looks like you have another question.
Yeah, and this could just be a misunderstanding on my part, but I was talking to the financial aid department about eligibility for a loan for a student, and they told me that part-time, that the student must be enrolled at least part-time, which they told me for a grad student is 5 to 8 credits. But I believe the minimum participation for tuition benefit for summer is 3 credits, right? Is that just a difference in how tuition benefit is handled? Does it just not, is it just not held to the part-time standard for summer semester, or did I get wrong information about what part-time is for summer? For
I
grad?
think it was more of some confusion there. So the halftime is correct, but halftime during summer is different than halftime during fall and spring. The 5 to 8 credits would be halftime during fall,
Okay.
spring.
Okay, so then I should okay. I just wanted to, it seemed weird to me that my student could participate in tuition benefit in summer at 3 credits, but not be eligible for a loan and not be considered part-time. So I need to go back to financial aid about that. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to jump in anytime with a hand or such. Again, you can send us messages as well. I will stay on and answer as many questions as humanly possible during this time. So
Thank you.
yes, thank you guys as well for all the, we're able to attend. I hope this has been helpful for you.
Thank you. This has been super helpful.
I may have missed really quick. I know
Yeah.
that you said there were updates that were coming to the report. I've talked to Matt about my concerns with the report and things like that. Do you have an ETA for when those, it's still a software issue that you're looking at?
It's a constant work in progress is what I would say.
Yeah, so we are working with UIT on a number of
Good.
tuition benefit system issues. And unfortunately, we do not have an ETA on anything, just given some university priorities that are taking
Yeah,
time from
Absolutely.
UIT.
I just was curious.
Part of
Absolutely.
it, I feel like currently, I think they're in a moratorium as well, which means they're not doing any big system updates at the moment
Right.
for other purposes. And that's pretty normal at the beginning of the semester, but I feel like we constantly seem to find the moratorium dates. But that just might be our bad luck.
Matt,
Sarah,
I wanted to answer
go
that
ahead.
financial aid question that lady had. I was like, hey, I can answer that. And I'm like, no, this is not what you do anymore.
It's hard to disassociate
hard.
yourself
It's hard.
from that.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I was like, I have registrar experience. Let me bring that in. Sarah, you have a question, I believe.
Yeah, so I was just waiting because this is pretty specific to our department, but last